Welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Wednesday evening. Had a few transactions around Major League Baseball today and yesterday. We'll dig into a few of those. Had some announcements as far as the Cy Young Manager of the Year race as well. We'll get into those as well. But first, welcome in. Hit that like and subscribe if you're new here, and let's get started. The one thing we're all kind of looking forward to this offseason is all the different transactions that always happen around this time of year. Teams try to improve, shake things up, or just go into a rebuild, sell off the pieces that they can for parts, and try to build toward the next contending team in their future. That's kind of what we all look forward to in the offseason as baseball fans. So it was good news when we finally started to get the ball moving in that direction. The Rule 5 designations have been declared. Players have been protected. A lot of back-end roster moves. Nothing of too much consequence, at least for the year of 2024, 2025, going into next year. The years forward, they may, of course, have bigger significance, but the bigger ones today we'll discuss are the Rockies bringing in a catcher, Jacob Stallings. Small move, but they needed to bring in somebody. Looks like Diaz is going to find a new home elsewhere. But the bigger moves are what the Cubs and the New York Mets were able to pull off. Mets were able to add an outfielder, Jose Siri. You might remember him with his days with the Houston Astros and subsequently with the Tampa Bay Rays. They get a good utility guy as a fourth, fifth outfielder, if you will. I don't think he's going to be starting every day. At least I wouldn't be starting him every day if I'm in the Mets organization. If he's playing for you 162 games a year, that means you really didn't get what you needed to in free agency. And I think they're going to have the ammunition to be able to get whatever they want to go for in free agency. I mean, come on. We're talking about Steve Cohen, richest owner that's willing to throw around whatever money he needs to get that team to be able to contend. We saw that what happened with that a couple of years ago when they brought in Justin Verlander. Ultimately, it didn't work out. They realized it wasn't working, and they used the one asset that they had, which was Steve Cohen, and the money he was willing to pay down on the Scherzer deal and the Verlander deal to be able to get them some prospects. And this is kind of the fruition of that. Because they were able to do so, now they're able to kind of use the lower levels of their prospect system and be able to acquire Jose Siri here. Smaller move, fourth, fifth outfielder, but it gets the ball rolling for the New York Mets, who, as we all know, like to move early in free agency. We saw that last year. We saw that the year before. And the Mets don't like to sit idly by. They want to go out there and get the guys they view as impactful pieces for their team and go ahead and snatch them up before other teams kind of overwhelm them with bidding. And that's kind of where the way the Mets like to operate, at least over the last couple of off seasons. So a quick strike once again here for the Mets to get the ball rolling for them this offseason. Second move is the Chicago Cubs getting a relief pitcher. Pitched to a 3.48 ERA so far in his career, but last year was incredible for the Cleveland Guardians. I want to say around a 2 ERA last year. But this does help strengthen the Cubs bullpen. Still a smaller level move, but this does get the Cubs going in the right direction as far as that bullpen. Remember, they had so many arms in and out of that back end last year, so hopefully this year we'll have a little bit better consistency out of that bullpen group. Let us know in the comments section what you think this does for both of those teams, and let's get on to some of the bigger headlines. We'll start with the awards. Chris Sale gets the NL Cy Young. The American League Cy Young goes to Tarek Skubal. Congratulations to both of those guys. Chris Sale was one of my favorite pitchers when I was younger, and ultimately he had injury issues that kind of derailed things for him at the very end of his career there with the Boston Red Sox. Ultimately found a new lease on life last year with the Atlanta Braves, and boy, did they need him to perform the way he did. I would argue that the Atlanta Braves probably lose another 15 games if it weren't for Chris Sale. His performance last year really was a linchpin in their rotation and kind of helped steady the ship with the injuries that they had and the poor performance that they had at the back end of that rotation. It was a very thin, very light group, and Chris Sale really helped give them a nice boon last year. Now, they're still going to be a little bit thin in that starting rotation, even bringing back Chris Sale. Not sure how much longer you can count on him to give you Cy Young level production, but hey, maybe this is a sign of better things to come, health being a better consideration for him. But as far as I'm concerned, they still have to address that rotation. I would expect them to look at guys like Walker Buehler, both the Chicago Cubs and the Atlanta Braves have already held discussions with Walker Buehler's camp. That would be a good get. I think a low-cost option here, 1 year 18, 1 year 15, if you can get him for that cheap. But he has ace-level ability. The question is he able to reach that ceiling once again? They could, of course, go back and circle the wagons one more time with Charlie Morton, but I think they need to get at least one, probably two more starters in there if I'm the Atlanta Braves. Now, as far as Tarek Skubal goes, absolutely from start to finish was the most dominant pitcher in the American League, and it honestly wasn't that close. As far as the skill level, we knew around the trade deadline, hey, he's probably going to win the American League Cy Young Award if he doesn't get traded. Tigers did the right thing. They held on to him, and he finished the year and ultimately delivered on that promise. He was exemplary last year. I'm just wondering, is this the sign of things to come, or is this a one-year high point in his career? That's what I want to see is what happens next season. So Tigers have much to hope for with him at the front end of their rotation. I still think they need to add another couple arms as well, and they seem to have the money to be able to go out there and add a couple of pieces this offseason. I'm not saying they're going to add Corbin Burns or anything like that, but I am saying they're going to add probably a couple of pitchers in that 15-ish range as far as salary. I think that's what this organization needs. They still need to add some pop on the offensive side as well. Their offense has struggled at times. They got some nice rookie performances last year offensively as well. So hopefully they can keep the ball rolling in a positive direction. So those are kind of the big headlines. Manager of the year. Let me go ahead and I want to make sure I get the names right. We got Stephen Vogt and Pat Miller. Vogt anyway was the the Cleveland Guardians manager. They really ran away with the AL Central, ultimately falling short. And it sounds like they're going to push the chips to the center this year a little bit as they try to win now. They realize they have a team that's constructed to try to push it over the finish line. And I wouldn't be surprised if they moved off of a guy like Naylor. Sounds like his name is being thrown out there quite a bit as far as a trade candidate for them to possibly improve both their lineup or their starting rotation. I'm curious to see which direction they decide to go. Do they go more offense leaning, or do they bring in a starting pitcher? Guardians typically develop their own starting pitching. If I'm in their shoes, I wouldn't be so quick to move off of Naylor. I'd rather move some of the prospects. I understand prospects are the most valuable thing in the organization, but if you're trying to win now, if that's your stated purpose, taking a big cog out of that lineup isn't exactly the way I would go about it. Now, if you're saying, hey, I want to be able to, contend for a 3, 4, 5-year window, then I'd probably see the possibility of moving off of a Naylor rather than trading those prospects. That's kind of what the Guardians have been doing, pretty much over the last 15 years now, is just cycling through those prospects. Once they get close to free agency, peddling them or, whatever they ultimately have to do, or see if they can get them to a team-friendly deal. We saw that with Jose Ramirez. They got him at the number that they wanted to, and he was very happy to stay in Cleveland, and they were able to get the deal done. But that's kind of the exception, not the rule. They usually don't get the hometown discount for players of his caliber, and so usually they usually go for the prospects rather than trading off of their major league roster in order for a win now type of a move. So we shall see what they do. I'm curious to see if they actually pull the trigger on anything. But as it stands right now, Stephen Vogt last year did a great job with that team. They really did overperform. Let's see if he can do it again. This was a first-year rookie manager, never really managed before. He had been a position coach anyway, an infield coach as well, catching mentor in the minors or at the major league level anyway before, but never really had a bench coach job or anything like that. And he was great this year for the Guardians, as demonstrated by their record. Pat Murphy taking over for Craig Counsell, who went over to the division rival Chicago Cubs. Everybody knew they were going through a little bit of a rebuild process. We knew their offense probably would have its ups and downs, but that would be the calling card of this team, and it was. But it was a great job by Pat Murphy to be able to work with that rotation and that bullpen to be able to win that division. That was all on coaching, and that was great. I'm not saying that they can do it again. They have the limitations that they have. The young players, you wonder if they're going to have a sophomore slump next year anyway. But Pat Murphy last year was exemplary for the Brewers. Congratulations to Vogt and to Pat Murphy there. Appreciate you guys joining us. Once again, it's almost 10 o'clock here Central Time. Welcome back in, Mark. If you guys are new here, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Please feel free to comment, ask any questions about what your team is going to be looking at in this free agency window. What trades could we possibly be looking at? Those kinds of things. We'd be more than happy to help you out, keep you updated. And you can follow us over on X at UpsideSN as well. We'll be adding some more social media out there as well. We'll have some new videos posting for you guys tomorrow as well. Made some of those for you this afternoon. And should be a fun day for you guys. If you guys want to hit that subscribe button, you'll catch up on all the things you may have missed around the world of sports. Baseball in particular is what we focus on with our show here, MLB Hot Stove Daily. And let's get into some of the headlines. Now, I want to start with Juan Soto, the saga there. He is the biggest free agent on the board. That obviously is where the offseason begins and ends for most fan interest anyway. We saw that last year with Shohei Ohtani and the year before with Aaron Judge. Juan Soto is the next guy up of that ilk that's going to get a hefty payday. There are several teams in the running for him. We'll start with the incumbent team, the New York Yankees. They have already had a productive meeting. It's been said anyway that the numbers have been thrown around, all those kinds of things. Well, they cleared the air and said, no, nobody's been giving out numbers yet. No team has exchanged contract figures. So I know we had somebody in our chat the other day saying, oh yeah, they had the Mets had offered 15 years, 16 years at $660 million. None of that is true. None of those things have actually happened. These meetings are strictly getting to know you, getting acquainted type of meetings, which is completely understandable. I know probably Juan Soto wants to step back and let Boris handle this. Boris does do very well for his clients, and he has a bone to pick with the industry after how they handled things last year for his two top clients in Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell. Ultimately, he's going to right the ship, though, with Juan Soto this year. He is going to break the piggy bank, as they say, and Soto's going to do very well. So the meet and greets have already begun. We've already seen him meet with the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, and yesterday he met with the Dodgers. Now, all of those teams, I think, have a legitimate case to at least be in there for a guy like Juan Soto. I'd say the Blue Jays are a distant 5 out of that group. Red Sox make a little bit more sense, but not by much. I still think it's a 3-team race, though. Yankees, Mets, and Dodgers. There are other teams that, of course, could afford him and may shock us all, be the typical dark horse. I'm going to go ahead and push that one to the side because I think it's going to be one of those big market teams that gets it done. So Yankees are probably the most financially strained out of those 3 teams. Not saying that they couldn't go up as high as they need to be able to bring him back, but I would say if there's a competitive offer on the table from the New York Yankees, all things being equal, maybe he goes back to New York. But I think that's not going to be the case. I think the Mets and the Dodgers both are going to outbid the Yankees by a significant margin, and they're going to say, hey, we did all we could. We're going to turn around and spend that money we're going to spend on Soto on X, Y, and Z. We're going to make this trade here. And that's the way I think the Yankees offseason is going to go more than likely. Now, in the unlikely event that Soto does come back to New York, I say unlikely because I would say it's less than a 50% certainty right now. Whether that's more than what the Mets' chances are or the Dodgers, it's still less than 50. And so in the unlikely event that Juan Soto is back, what does that leave on the table for the Yankees to do? Well, their most important priority right now outside of Juan Soto has got to be to address that bullpen. They're losing a couple arms out of there. They really struggled to get consistent performances out of there from time to time last year. That's part of the reason why they lost in the series to the LA Dodgers. They have to address the bullpen, whether it be via trade, Devin Williams, or they go after a Tanner Scott, bring back Holmes, they go after Trinan. There's a bunch of different guys out there like Kirby Yates, David Robertson, who is familiar with New York as well. They need to address that bullpen. There is rumblings that they could address the back end of their rotation as well. Mark, Jays need to extend Vlad finally before attracting more free agents. If you believe what's coming out of the Blue Jays organization, they believe this core needs to stick together, and why not? This is an organization that's trying to fight for their jobs right now. I mean, most of the guys in the front office and the executive wing anyway are at least have one eye on the door, seeing who's coming through, who's going to be leaving, because all of their jobs are going to be on the line this year. It's win or you're out. At least that's from what I'm gathering from the outside looking in. Ross Adkins is one of those guys that could be on the move if things don't work out this year. Vlad Guerrero, of course, his time in Toronto is winding down if they don't get a deal done. There was some rumblings that they could have traded him last year at the deadline or even before the season. Ultimately, that didn't happen, obviously. Vlad Guerrero Jr., of course, is a first baseman by trade, does have some defensive versatility to be able to play third base as well, but he's primarily going to be a DH here in the next 2 or 3 years. How long of a deal would it take to be able to sign him? How much money is it going to cost? All of those things are important to discuss, but the bigger picture for the Blue Jays is how do they view this offseason? They seem to be saying all the right things publicly as far as we want to compete, we want to push the the pedal all the way down to the floorboards, we want to get this thing over the top and win a series. Of course, every team wants to do that. But I mean, the Colorado Rockies have a realistic understanding that they're not going to beat the Dodgers in the division, let alone win the entire World Series. So the Blue Jays, they struggled last year. They struggled to even be a 500 team. They didn't make the postseason. They didn't make the series, obviously. They have a big hill to climb. They have some good veterans on that team. A lot of guys had down years last year. They need a little bit of help in that rotation, a touch in the bullpen. But they're looking to make a big splash in free agency. They sound like they're one of the more aggressive teams on a number of free agents, including Juan Soto, Willie Adames to a certain extent, and Alex Bregman. We've already seen them pry away one Houston Astro in George Springer. Maybe the next one is Alex Bregman to take over at third base. Maybe even a shortstop replacement if they move off of Bo Bichette if things go horribly off the rails by the trade deadline. Bichette was not traded last year, had a terrible year at the plate anyway. Injuries as well kind of hampered him from time to time. So if things go well for the Blue Jays and they put all their chips to the center, maybe, just maybe, they save all their jobs, make it into the postseason, win a series or two. But I just don't think that's overly likely. I think the Jays more than likely are seeing the final days of this, core group, this contending group that they've had for the last 5-6 years now. And it's just time to move on, turn the page, flip to a younger core, change things up. I think that's where we're at with the Toronto Blue Jays. If they're able to get that thing turned around and back in the right direction again, great. I just think it's more likely than not that we're going to be seeing that Toronto Blue Jays organization go through a tough rebuilding phase here in the next 2 to 3 years. This might be the final year that they really have a competitive team on the field, and we'll see if they can get this thing righted. I'm hoping for it. I was a Toronto Blue Jays fan to some extent anyway when I was younger. Of course, when they face off against my Rangers, going to pull for my Rangers. But I still remember the days of was it Carlos Delgado up there and all them guys. Esteban Loaiza back in the day. Who else was there? There's a bunch of them anyway. But like the Blue Jays, didn't really enjoy the Jose Bautista era, of course. No, I don't think any Rangers fan did. But Page has definitely been turned there in Toronto. George Springer was one of the Astros I couldn't stand. He's a little bit more tolerable, I guess, to a certain extent on the Blue Jays. So I find myself rooting for them a little bit more than I have been in, say, the last 6-7 years when Jose Bautista and company were there ruining the day for the Rangers, of course. But anyway, Vernon Wells, yeah, I remember that one. Vernon Wells, for some reason I'm thinking Mondesi as well, but anyway. It's 10 o'clock at night. I've got a few videos done for you guys today. Got those coming out for you guys tomorrow. Long day at work tomorrow, but we'll be live for you guys again around 9 o'clock. A little bit late one tonight. I had some errands to get done around the city anyway, but I'll be back live again tomorrow night. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. I do want to go over a couple more things before we log off here tonight. First is going to be where we are at as far as all the rest of the market besides Juan Soto. We'll start with the starting pitcher market. We talked a little bit about this the other night. It's top heavy with guys like Burns, Kenneth Fried anyway, Max Fried anyway. And then you got a really good, nice crop underneath that. We're talking about guys like Nathan Eovaldi, Andrew Heaney, Luis Severino. There's a lot of guys in that $10 to $20 million range that are going to do very well in free agency. There's so many starting pitchers out there, but there are even more holes in rotations around the league. So expect some of the starting pitching to come flying off the board here in the next couple of weeks before we get to the winter meetings. I would expect some of those guys that are going to be in that 10 to 20 range might be looking to sign up for a guaranteed deal rather than being the last guy holding the bag, and then you're looking at being this year's version of Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell. Now, Snell had a nice rebound at the second half of the year. Montgomery did not, and ultimately picked up his option. Things are not going well for him, to say the least, out there in Arizona. But I think all of those free agents in that 10 to 20 range should look at this and be like, hey, maybe I should be a little worried here. The one qualifying offer guy that I'm a little bit worried for is Nick Pivetta. I worry about injuries. I worry about how much money he's actually going to make out there on the market. I was I thought he might have accepted the qualifying offer, just be able to prove that he's able to perform as a number two ish type of starter, maybe an ace on his best day, a number three, four on his worst day. But ultimately, he decided to decline it and test the waters. Now, there's going to be compensation attached to him, so teams might be shied off by that. We've seen that a little bit in the past as well. So we'll see where he ultimately goes and at what price point. But starting pitching is where I'm going to be focusing on over the next couple of weeks. There's not too many impact hitters in this year's free agent class. We pretty much talked about all three of them quite a bit already. Juan Soto, of course, leads the pack. Then you got Alex Bregman, and then you get into guys like Pete Alonso and Willie Adames. Let's focus on the first basemen of that group. We've already talked quite a bit about Bregman, Soto, and Adames. As far as first base, Pete Alonso, kind of a one-trick pony as far as at the plate, all that power, but he's going to be pushed to a DH spot eventually. He's not necessarily a plus defender at first base anymore. At best, he plays the field maybe a year or two more. But at that price point, say 5 years, $100 million, how many teams are willing to eat that cost or have that sunk cost at a DH only spot? Now, I understand baseball, there's a lot of money in the sport right now, but is there really enough money to be able to afford a guy who's only a DH at this point? Now, we have this discussion every year, and every year there's one or two guys that seem to find spots, and then the rest of the guys that are first base DH only type of guys end up not being signed anywhere. They don't even get signed to minor league deals because they want their lower level minor league guys taking those at bats at those spots and developing at the plate. And I still think Pete Alonso's probably going to do very well, but the other guys like him are not. He still has that one incredible tool. That power is unmatched in the major leagues. For swing, he has the most power in all of baseball. I could hear arguments about Judge. I could hear arguments about Ohtani. But for me, Alonso's the guy with the most power, and he's able to convert that power into home runs in game. We saw Joey Gallo has all the power in the world, but he'll hit you, a 600-foot pop-up, to the pitcher, and doesn't exactly capitalize on that power as much as we thought he would coming out as a top-level prospect in the Rangers organization. So good on Pete Alonso for learning that skill and being able to hone that skill in and to prove it in game that he can use it. But as far as the other first baseman on the market is Christian Walker. For my money, I would rather spend the money on a Christian Walker type. He's a plus defender at first base. His offense really seemed to turn a corner this year. He looked like he was starting to hit for a little bit more pop than he had. He was already a gap hitter as well. So now you're talking about a guy who can hit you 20, 25, 30 bombs a year. I'm curious to see where he goes. We heard at the deadline last year that the Houston Astros were kicking the tires on Christian Walker. The Rangers have a decision to make with Nathaniel Lowe at first base. To me, Christian Walker is a very similar player offensively. Defensively, they're very similar as well. I would be curious if the Rangers decided to double down on first base and say, hey, one of you two is going to, take the job and win it. The other one we're going to end up trading at the deadline or next offseason. That's something as a Rangers fan I would like to see. They're going to prioritize pitching, though. They have been doing so the last couple of years with CY in charge. Eovaldi, Heaney are going to be their targets to bring back. But they need to address that offense as well. And I think Christian Walker would be a great fit there in Texas. Other teams that need a first baseman, we just talked about the Houston Astros. Say Pete Alonso signs elsewhere, the New York Mets would have an opening there. The Yankees fans are always looking for the new shiny object. I think he'd be a great fit there. The Seattle Mariners are always looking for some more offense. I think he'd be another great fit there. So there's so many teams out there that could use a player like Christian Walker. I agree with you, Mark. He is so underrated. It's criminal. I would argue he's probably at the borderline top 5. He's in that 5 to 10 range. I'll put it that way. As far as first baseman in the game, Freddie Freeman, I think, reestablished himself as the number one guy there at first base in my eyes. He always has been at that point, but I think the injuries in the second half of the year had me wondering if he was going to be able to maintain that. And ultimately, we saw what he was able to do in the postseason. Had his Kirk Gibson moment. He was incredible. Welcome in, Sean. What time is the non-tender deadline tomorrow? I thought that was... I can't remember. I thought that was Friday. I don't remember. I'll look into that for you, Sean, anyway. For some reason, I thought that was Friday. But anyway, just to kind of wrap up our conversation on the position players that are out there, we already talked a little bit now about the first baseman. I want to get a little further down there into the catching market. Travis d'Arnaud has already been signed this offseason. There's not too many catchers out there, but it's always a position of need around baseball. Let us know in the comment section who you guys think is the top catcher out there, and who do you think he's going to go to. For me, there are so many teams out there that need an improvement there. It's always a big discussion, at least for me, with the friends that I have that follow baseball, is where these teams are going to get the biggest impact in the offseason. Catcher, obviously, you can impact both sides of the ball, handling a pitching staff, handling the offensive duties of the game as well. But a catcher nowadays plays 90 to 100 games max and then splits the rest of the time with another catcher. So, for instance, let's take the Texas Rangers. Jonah Heim was statistically the worst offensive player in all of baseball last year. That was 1 year after starting for the American League in the All-Star game. Yikes. And then they brought in Carson Kelly, who had a nice offensive year, resurgent year for him, after bouncing around the league a little bit. I'm curious to see, what the Rangers do at that other catcher spot. I thought d'Arnaud would have been a great 1-2 punch there with Heim, if Heim can get his bat back on track. But Diaz might be the best option out there. Danny Jansen, to me, is right at the top of the list as well. Sub-Zero, welcome back. Would the Yankees consider trading Jose Trevino? I don't see why not. He's not an Aaron Judge on that roster. I'm sure if a deal came along to their liking, they might move off of him. Like I said, catchers nowadays start 90 to 100 games, and I think Trevino is starting to fall out of favor a little bit as far as being the number one catcher for the Yankees. Jays should bring back Danny Jansen. That was part of the problem when they had 3 catchers anyway. Remember the deal that they made with the Arizona Diamondbacks to bring in Dalton Varsho in the deal that sent Gurriel and Moreno to the Diamondbacks? It was because they had Danny Jansen and they had Alexander Kirk, and ultimately they went with Kirk. They decided to keep Jansen at least for the time being. Things didn't work out last year for the Blue Jays, so they decided to move off of Danny Jansen, get what they could in trade, and they did well, in my opinion, by moving a backup catcher and still getting some nice prospects in return. Danny Jansen, though, really developed that power over the last couple of years. Every time I turn on a Jays game, it's Danny Jansen doing significant damage and making an impact in a key moment in a game. And so I think a team that needs a catcher, a guy that is a very good defensive catcher still, and has a good power bat, I think he might be one of the top ones on the market as far as I'm concerned. As far as the Jays, they could use him back as a backup catcher, but he's one of my top options out there. All right. Last thing before we head off anyway, I just want to go into some of the trades that we've seen out there. Let's go ahead and update the Baseball Trade Values website just to see what else y'all are proposing out there. One name that's been floated this offseason is Nolan Arenado for the St. Louis Cardinals. Cardinals are going to be entering the 1-year rebuilding process. Cardinals never really do this. This is the first time since, before I was born that they've gone through a rebuild. That's how long it's been since the Cardinals have been in a rebuilding situation. And it's time for them to move on from Nolan Arenado. I thought the time was last year to really do so, but they thought, hey, we'll sign all these other guys in free agency. We'll go the veteran route, and ultimately it blew up in their faces. So, as far as Nolan Arenado is concerned, I think you could get something for him, sure, but I don't think you're going to get back a significant franchise-altering package in return. I think this team needs to free up some at-bats for some of their prospects that they have coming, and they need to get this rebuild turned around quick and back into contention because that NL Central is not going to wait for them. Brewers have a good young core that they're developing on the offensive side. They need to get the pitching figured out a little bit. Pittsburgh, meanwhile, has the pitching side figured out. They need more offense. So if they get the offense figured out, which I do expect them to add 1 or 2 pieces this offseason, those teams are going to be starting to pull away from the rest of that division. Now, the Reds have a good young core as well offensively. The pitching still is a little light. They're bringing back Nick Martinez on the 1-year qualifying offer. He pitched well for them, don't get me wrong, but a long-term commitment for him would have been a mistake. A 1-year deal, $20 million, if it gives you the same level of production that he just gave you, might be worth it for them. And then, of course, you have the Chicago Cubs, who are, ever since they had the World Series, they've kind of busted up their core. Chris Bryant went his own way. Kyle Schwarber went his own way. Hendricks, one of the last vestiges of that team, is now a member of the LA Angels. And it's just a whole new day out there in Chicago. They brought in Dansby Swanson. They've got Cody Bellinger now. But this team needs a little bit of a facelift as far as I'm concerned, and I think they have the money to be able to do so. The question is, will they spend the money? That's part of the reason why that core is no longer there. They decided not to spend on that core, and you can't really argue with the results of their decision. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Chris Bryant who can't stay healthy, plays 40 games a year, and makes an ungodly amount of money. He would have been, oh, that would have been so bad for the Cubs to have to eat that contract. Then you look at the other horrible contract in baseball, Javi Baez for the Detroit Tigers. That I would argue is the worst signing in the Detroit Tigers history, and it's not really that close. I know Prince Fielder had the injury issues; they traded him for Ian Kinsler, but ultimately, I would say the production was better for you out of Prince Fielder with what you got, and then not having him for the final years of that deal, rather than just having Javi Baez where you're at today. That deal is absolutely atrocious, and the Cubs are. I'm guaranteeing you they're thanking their lucky stars that they did not eat on either one of those deals. The one they probably wish they would have kept is Kyle Schwarber. He's played well for the Philadelphia Phillies. That hit tool really does play literally everywhere. Great eye at the plate as well, good power, and he's had a nice career with the Philadelphia Phillies. But back to the Cardinals discussion here. Nolan Arenado, teams that need a veteran presence, teams that are a player or two away to pushing them over the top of winning a series. Bring in a guy like Nolan Arenado, reinvigorate himself, and getting back to playing, say, 2 or 3 years earlier in his career anyway. So what I mean by that is a younger version of him would have played a little bit better. Maybe getting back into a competition or getting back to a team that is competing for a series might reinvigorate him and have him play a little bit better than what he's been doing for the Cardinals the last year or so. But, as far as I'm concerned, Nolan Arenado needs to go to a team and kind of, hopefully push that team over the top. For instance, let's take the Dodgers. They go after pretty much everybody that they want. Say they identify Nolan Arenado as their type of guy. He has the pedigree. He's not going to have a huge acquisition cost. They can stomach the cost of bringing him in. If they bring in a guy like that, that really lengthens out a team like that to where they, maybe had a hole at third base with Muncy and so forth. But I think Muncy's a good fit there. But now they can deploy Muncy all over the field. They can put him at second. They can put him at first. They can play him at third base. They can put him at DH. He's a utility player for them, much like he was earlier when the Dodgers were having their biggest successes before they finally won the series. They're very platoon heavy at this point. I think getting a guy like Nolan Arenado would help make them a little bit impervious to some of those issues, and that's why I think a team like that would be a good fit for Nolan Arenado. Other teams that are World Series contenders, I would say the Yankees could look to bring in another offensive piece. He can float pretty much everywhere, third base, first base, or DH for the Yankees. A team like the New York Mets is always looking to improve any way they possibly can. If they get top-flight free agents in there this offseason, I think they would be another fit as a team that I would classify as a World Series contender that could use his abilities. Now, say the Houston Astros don't bring back Nolan Arenado, the price gets too high for Willy Adames. Maybe they circle back to their former NL Central foe in the St. Louis Cardinals and bring in Nolan Arenado. So he's one name I'm keeping my eye on as far as the trade front goes. But there are so many teams out there that are looking to move off of some money as well. Texas Rangers have $40 million to spend this offseason. I'm sure they would love to bring back Heaney and Eovaldi. That would eat up all of their money that they have to spend, and they still have to address the offense and their backup catcher and their bullpen, adding at least 3 more pieces back there. I'm sure they would love to offload a contract like a John Gray, even though he is an exemplary teammate. There's so many players like that in that $10 to $20 million range that could be moved as far as cost-saving moves here as we get closer to the winter meetings. So, Aaron, welcome in. Welcome in, Skywalking. Will Soto sign soon? Here's our prediction for Juan Soto. I do think the market is moving for Juan Soto. I think he's understanding where he wants to play. I think before he even entered the offseason, he had an idea where he wanted to go already. He's still going to take these meetings, see if anybody blows his socks off. And then once they get all that done, he's going to give a list to his agent and of 2 or 3 teams, be like, hey, I want to go here. This is the price point I'm looking for. Boris is going to go way above that and try to keep all these other teams in there and drive up the price. And he's going to do what agents do and try to get the best deal for his client. As far as how quickly could all this come together, well, we're already having the getting to know you meetings now We've got 2 weeks and change until the winter meetings, which, by the way, will be live for you guys here at the Upside. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe. That way you guys stay up to date from every bit of news that's happening at the winter meetings. In all likelihood, we'll be broadcasting from the winter meetings if we can get it with cleared with the hotel there. So we'll take a look into that for you guys. But as far as as far as Juan Soto, the timeline for him, I would expect the winter meetings is where this thing gets done. Scott Boras has to course correct from what happened last offseason. I would expect this to get done much like an Albert Pujols signing was done at the winter meetings. They announced on, I believe, the Tuesday or Wednesday of the winter meetings. I would expect somewhere in that 15-year, $640-ish million range because of how young he is. And that offense is literally just unmatched on the open market right now. The only players better right now in baseball, I would say, are Yordan Alvarez, Corey Seager, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, maybe Freddie Freeman, but Juan Soto is on that same level of player. There are very few superstar aircraft carrier type of players that can make that level of offensive impact for you. Now, I did hear some of the arguments from some of the daily talk show hosts out there. Dan Patrick on his show yesterday, I believe, as I was driving into work, was saying something to the effect of, well, he's not an Aaron Judge. He's not a Shohei Ohtani. And while he's not the media superstar that those guys are, he is every bit the offensive player of those two. Maybe a half tick less, but we're splitting hairs at that point. And players of his ilk are very rare and hard to come by. They never get to free agency at his age as well. So that's why the price is going to get up there. And I understand some teams, some fan bases may be turned off by the sheer price tag of it all. I get all that. But where are you going to get that level of production? You think your AAA prospect is going to be able to do it? Just ask the Texas Rangers what they thought of Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford coming into the year. Now, I still think those are two great pieces for the Texas Rangers' future going forward. But either one of them, are they Juan Soto right now even put together? I would say no. I still think they're great players. I think they're going to do great things. But Juan Soto, those level of players are so rare in the game, he's going to do very well in free agency. So to answer your question, Skywalking, I'm expecting at the winter meetings. Aaron, don't remind us of Javi. Well, sorry. Had to do it. I mean, Javi Baez is just absolutely a miserable player to watch play the game. You can tell what's going to happen before he even gets into the batter's box. He's going to watch strike one. He's going to swing and miss at a ball outside the zone by 1.5 feet. And then the pitcher's going to see that and then throw it basically into the other dugout. And Javi Baez is going to swing at it and say, shucks, I almost had it. And then he's going to go out there and do the same thing in his next at-bat and the next at-bat. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit, yes, but it's just happened so many times, very similar to that type of scenario, that I just don't see it getting better. He has his good days and his bad, just like any other player. He has his good stretches and his bad, but by and large, I think if the Detroit Tigers had a do-over on that one, or like in the NBA, they could amnesty a contract back in the day. I remember the Mavericks amnestied Michael Finley's money to try to save as much money as they could against their cap sheet when he was starting to fail at the back end of his career. If the Tigers could do something like that with Javi Baez right now, they would do so in a heartbeat and wouldn't think twice as they shoved him out the door. So, sorry Javi Baez, but play a little bit better and we'll talk a little bit better about you. So, all right, well, we appreciate you guys joining us tonight. A little bit longer stream than I was originally intending. Had a lot to do today. I apologize for not getting on until about 9:40, but we'll be live a little bit earlier tomorrow. Got some videos for you guys coming out. Make sure you check those out. Hit the like and subscribe. Send us a chat if you'd like. We really appreciate all the interaction you guys give us. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Y'all have a good one.